All right. Good morning and welcome to In Search of Prosperity Sisterhood. I am so glad you ladies are here today, whether you're here on us live with Stevie and myself, or jumping into the live chat later on, or on the replay. As things come up for you, as words come to your head or your heart, jot them down, throw them in the chat, raise your hand, ask the question, do the thing. Okay. In here, we like to take action and be inspired by our action. So, with that, I have Stevie here with us today, and she is a regular member here in the Sisterhood, and she is going to teach us all about moon planning. And particularly, she has shared like she wants Mercury retrograde to be our friend, which is quite the interesting mission. If you've ever worked in retail or the medical field or whatever, you'll hear all about it in every angle. And Stevie also has a free group, Magnetic Moon Planning, on Facebook. Please check her out. Get involved in whatever she's doing because she is quite awesome at it. So with that, I'm going to have Stevie take over and introduce herself. And this is literally a sisterhood takeover. So let's hear it, Stevie.
All right. Hey guys, thanks Shaina for having me. So like she said, my name is Stevie. I am a certified moonologist. Um, and I run magnetic moon planning. So a little bit about what moon planning is. So it's kind of just a way to supercharge your goal setting with the energies of the universe. So if you know anything about astrology, very similar. They're like a sister studies because the moon always is in one of those zodiac signs. Um, and if you are a little seasoned with astrology, I use whole house systems. If you don't know what that is, no problem. If you do and you use a different house system, also not a problem. Um, but when we set goals, so as we move through the zodiac signs, each sign has something that it's known for. Typically, like Aries gets a bad rap as like the fiery chaos sign. Geminis are similarly considered two-faced, but that's not what we do here. They all have their good things and their bad things, and we all have them somewhere in our chart. So that's why you'll see that not all Aries are the same or not all Gemini are the same because we have other placements in our chart that kind of flavor our personality. So with moon planning, you also have what are called the 12 houses. I use a whole house system, which just means that each house is ruled by one sign. There are other house systems where you can have multiple things in one sign, but I like to give everybody a fair chance to play, in my opinion. So as those moons go through the sign, they're also ruling a house for you. And Shane and I have different rising signs, so our house placements are different. So the first house is always your rising sign. And then from there, you don't have to remember them. You can just Google every time. What are the houses for Scorpio rising, Gemini rising, etc. Rising sign is the most personal part of your chart. It's the sign that was on the horizon when you were born. So there's always one that starts where like the sun kind of is, where the moon is. That's the horizon line. If you don't know your birth time, date, or location, not a problem. You can do this with just a regular sun sign. If you don't know that, you're still going to get goal setting in all 12 of those areas. So each house rules an area. So the upcoming, everyone's talking about it, new moon eclipse in Aries, which is Monday. If you're in the line of sight like me, you're probably super excited to see it. But Aries rules someplace in our chart for everyone. So Aries rising, first house. So that just means that if that new moon is happening in that house, that's where you're going to see those energies. Typically, the first house is the house of self. Um, and then each new moon, full moon also has energies that are just attached to the sign that it's in. So Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, which makes this the astrological new year, which is why you'll see a lot of the new age people talking about setting their New Year's goals now, because this is the new year. And it's also, it makes a little bit more sense. Like it's spring. as a general society, setting goals in December when everything is dead and dying is probably not the best call. You're a little out of sync with the energies of the universe. That's when you plan and set. Uh, so now's the time to let those things grow. So you're actually planting them in the ground, not you have that idea. Um, Eclipses always amplify this energy. Um, and with a new moon, that's when you plant your goals. So the way to think about it that helps me is to think that with a new moon, when everything is dark, we're planting that seed, and as the moon grows in the sky for the next month, our goals are going to. And then to kind of be the opposite, you'll see astrology is a lot of opposites. When we have the moon in one sign, the sun is in the opposite sign. So they're typically counterbalancing of energies, push and pull, drawing you one way or the other. So with the full moon, you want to let stuff go. Again, that's going to rule somewhere in your house, depending on what sign it's in. But that's always a good time, whether it's yourself, the people around you, a situation, you let it go, you create a void because the universe is always going to fill a void. It's one of those, if you do a lot of money manifestation stuff, they always tell you to like, even if you are barely making ends meet, to even if you donate a penny a day or a penny a week, to not hold on to everything so tight because you have to create some kind of void for the universe to fill. So it's the full moon is for, is just to release, let go. I like to burn stuff, but you can let it go however you like. Um, and let's see, and this is an interesting month too, because we have the eclipse. Mercury retrograde is also in Aries. Um, Venus is coming into Aries. Mars is Aries. Venus is the planet of love. Mars is the planet of war. And those are general terms. So like when you think Mars, when you think passion, aggression, fire, um, it's not always bad. Venus is the planet of love, self-love, relationships. They're all in Aries, which means that it's going to be a really spicy month. And I like to think of it as Aries is the start. So this is like the Phoenix time. Everything is burning, but it's not a bad thing because from those ashes is going to arise something new. So this is the month to break through, let go fear, burn it all the way. Start over where you need to start over. Redo what needs redoing. And as you go through the new moons and the full moons, in those 12 houses and those 12 stages of life, if you set goals with them, you're going to see that you go through yourself, your family, your children or creativity, your spirituality, financial goals. Like they're all touched in there so that it helps us cycle through without having to. I mean, how many people, show of hands, have like a 30-page list of things they want to do? You can't do them all at once. You'll maybe get like one thing done and never anything done. Um, so this really just helps you kind of like focus in, see what needs to start planting. And just because you planted in one moon cycle does not mean it's going to grow into a full tree by the time the next new moon comes around. Sometimes it takes a little bit, but you're building the habits, you're seeing what needs to be done and reworking. And then, so new moons, if you're also teacher, nurse, doctor, anything that works with people, retail, restaurant, hospitality, new moons, Mercury retrograde are kind of those times when people get a little cray cray. But I don't like to do doom and gloom astrology. Even if something is challenging, it is helping you grow into the next version of yourself, to a next life. Like if you look at the obstacle like it's going to knock me on my ass and I'm going to stay there, it's not going to be a fun time. If you look at that obstacle like I'm going to figure out how to get over you, and when I get on the other side, I'm going to be a much better person, individual, better with my finances, whatever it is, because I saw that challenge and I figured out how to get over it. Now, Mercury retrograde. When I say she's your friend, she's like your astrological BFF. And I'm not talking about the BFF that like coddles you and was like, yeah, like that guy was totally the problem, when sometimes we're the problem. We got to be honest here. They're the one that's going to call you on your BS, give you the hard truth, tell you exactly what you need to hear. And you have the choice to either take that feedback and be like, okay, this is the part that I contribute to the problem and I'm going to work on it. Or look at them and be like, no, I'm not the problem. And then next time Mercury goes retrograde again, she's going to be like, hey, remember that thing I told you last time? You were like, no, that's not true. It's back. Um, so that's why I say like Mercury retrograde gets a bad rap, but it's because if we're not ready to change that lesson or learn it or move on, it's gonna keep coming back until just the universe just knocking like, yo, girl, you gotta listen. Um, so I always think about when you think of people say you go in a circle, but it's not a closed. nice little circle. It's a spiral. So every time it comes back around, we are coming out further. We're a new version of ourselves coming into that problem to help us get through it. Um, and actually, I have a story for this that I realized the other day. Part of this is because we have Facebook memories now, and I think some of the other social media signs do too. But when you start going through that, I look at mine every day, and like most of the time, it's like looking at if you remember when Facebook first came out, and you were just like, "I'm tired," or "I'm hungry," "I have all this homework," and then, um, as they progressed, now I can see like, oh, this has happened before, or like similar to the same days. I'm posting things that are really similar, even between friends. Um, so one example, almost a day to the year apart. Last year, the kid that lives with me had been like, "You're like my second mom," because she lives with us. She's lived with us for almost 8 years, um, almost a year to the day. And I only know this because I saw it in my Facebook memory. She asked me to be her mom because she thinks that her mom has abandoned her. And it had been this whole drawn out conversation. And she was like, "Hey, will you be my mom?" And like seeing that, I'm like, I bet that whatever you have in your chart, this is just where that comes up for you, where like that family motherly energy comes up. Um, and another one, I haven't told Shayna this, because I was waiting for this because absolutely blew my mind. So, um, I worked at a job for 14 months and I thought it was my dream job. It was perfect. Everything that I want to do was kind of converging into one. Um, and then around June, uh, some things started happening. And at the time, I did not see what those things were. I didn't realize how this was going to like spiral and snowball. But what I thought was completely unrelated is I remember I'd come into work. I always had the phone, and I get this call from a journalist, and they're like, "Hey, we heard that a car ran into the Denny's, and like we were in an L-shaped building here. The Denny's is like way up by the intersection, but they're in our parking lot. Is that true?" I had driven in and not even paid attention. So I go to the door, I look out, and I'm like, "Well, I can't see a car in the building, but there are police and ambulances and fire trucks like everywhere, so it's probably a safe bet." And like it was weird, but I never thought about it again. So then that October, after the snowball kept rolling and rolling and rolling and getting bigger and bigger and bigger, um, my manager had stepped down and a week later just came in and quit because this things had gotten out of control. 2 days later, I'm standing there and I watch a fire truck drive by, and then the fire truck drives by again in our parking lot. And one of our customers was like, "Yo, I think that fire truck's lost," which is not uncommon. We have the most ridiculous parking lot ever. It's connected to like six other parking lot. People get lost all the time. So I'm like, I'm gonna go help them because obviously they're looking for something and they can't find it. So I walk out there. The fire truck wasn't lost. It was five different fire trucks and there are police everywhere. So I'm like, oh, am I about to get shot? Like, what is happening? There was a car in the building. It had ran into the building like through the pillars. I'm like, that is so weird. Like, how does that happen? Again, didn't think about it, didn't connect any dots. Though I had put in my notice. I put in my notice and we heard a car alarm going off. We look out in the thing, you can see this car smashed in. I thought they had like just backed into somebody. Like they had, I don't know how they were going that fast and smashed the front of their car in that mud. Well, whatever. 45 minutes later, the fire truck starts showing up. And I'm like, after the second one passed, I looked at my coworker. I'm like, I've been here before. I have had the same conversation about fire trucks. Like, what is happening? And so, like, I go out and start snooping. That car ran into the building like two doors down for us. So, like, three separate cars had just gotten closer to us. And I'm like, so I had to text the manager that sent. I was like, what are the odds that like 4 days after you quit, a car hit the building, and like I have 2 days left and a car hit the building? It turns out that was my last day. They took me off the schedule for my last 2 days, and so as like all the Mercury retrograde stuff started popping up, people are like, whatever started in October for you is coming to like a conclusion now. And I was like, in October, that was like the first big blowout from all this drama that had happened, and a car hit the building. And finally I was out and a car hit the building. I'm like, I worked at my old job for 17 years. No cars hit the building, not a single one. In 14 months, three cars have continuously gotten closer to our building. And I'm just like, man, once you start seeing those cycles and paying attention to them, like the things that you can, like, you'll be like, I get it. I see it. I hear you. Like my Mercury retrograde BFF is screaming loudly.
can I just say, like, the connections of all that and the visual you give me when you say BFF, right? Like, she's gonna tell you how it is. She's not gonna sugarcoat it. And it's just gonna be that siren, right? Like
Yeah.
that blaring thing, that fire truck. That is amazing.
And
Um,
if you don't listen, she will literally run a car into the building to get your attention 3 times.
oh my gosh. I didn't mean to interrupt, but
Oh,
please.
that covers all my that was that was my final thing. Like, I know as I tell that story, you all are picturing a person in your head, whoever your real BFF is, and you're like, yeah, she would definitely be like, that's what you need to do.
Yes. So I posted a question as you were talking, because I've been following you for a while and you've coached me through a few milestones and specific uh, dates, right? Milestones and dates. And then also just in general, um, the like before we jumped on, you were like, I'm sending you your 90-day overview soon, right? Like, yet I have this question of, are there other retrogrades? Like in the back of my mind, it's is it not just Mercury?
Yes, correct. All of the planets can go retrograde. Basically, all a retrograde is, like, scientifically, is a lot of the other planets have different orbits than we do. So there are certain points, like Mercury goes retrograde 2 to 3 times a year. Some of the rest of them can be retrograde for half the year. Some will take a little bit longer. It just looks like they're going backwards in the sky. So anytime something goes retrograde, think of like RE words. So refresh, revisit, revamp. Um, Mercury is the planet of communication. Uh, so typically anything around that and where it's hitting for you is where you're going to revisit whatever those lessons are. When Venus goes retrograde, it's a lot of refreshing and love, relationships, even self love. So it is just the planets though. Like, so the sun and moon will never go retrograde, but Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto will all retrograde at some point. They're typically not as devastational as Mercury retrograde because it's the planet of communication. Um, so if you notice the first day of Mercury retrograde, Instagram got wonky, and AT&T came out with like their hacking debacle. That's not uncommon. That's kind of why it gets a bad rap, because when you look at it from like that perspective, it can be challenging. But when you look at it from an personal and like introspective thing, it's just saying like, this is what we got to work on.
It makes me think of just this sisterhood in general. We talk a lot about communication, and that has everything to do with relationships, right? Um, yeah, the whole um speaking your language versus their language and uh then if we talk about just Mercury retrograde and the bad rap it gets, right? Like you're mentioning, I remember even talking about it before I even knew what it was, right? Like we just bash it in like retail and stuff like that. Like I'm just thinking, because I have a lot of retail experience. Um, but it goes back to the relationship and back to communication, where like if you're in customer service and you're dealing with people, it's just a little more chaotic than usual. It's a little harder to communicate and all of those things. Um, because yeah, I like that. I like that connection. Thank you for that.
Well, that was a good question.
Yep. Because like I said, I mean, I've talked about Mercury retrograde for years and years and years and years and years and never actually knew what it was. Like it was just this mythical thing that we made up and blamed things on when things didn't go right. Like or one after another kept happening, right? Um, what are, I had mentioned your Facebook group. What are some other resources you can share with the group and like maybe as they get curious about things or want to raise their hand, where can they find you? Where can they find other resources?
So you can always get with me in the group. Instagram and TikTok, it's Stevie underscore the underscore girl. It is not all numerology based. I do a couple different things, but they all connect because it's all goal setting and being like the authentic you and finding the cycles of the universe. I also do private coaching. I'm working on a subscription where you get like 90 days at a time, which is 3 moon cycles. Sometimes you get an extra one in there because there's 13 moon cycles per year versus 12. Mercury and a Mercury retrograde report. Um, and then if you are someone who likes to study, likes to know all the stuff, Yasmin Boland is a great resource. She's actually who I got certified through. She has a course with Hay House, which is kind of like the metaphysical training. They have tons of classes for anything you could want to know about metaphysical type stuff. And I also like it's Shawnee Nicholas, but it's spelled Chani. You Were Born for This. Um, Both of their books are really good. If you get your birth chart, you can go through and piece those together, and kind of see how all the different pieces fit in for you.
That is awesome. And earlier I had mentioned that um, I'm kind of part of that beta group of those 90-day cycles that you hand out specifically to that individual. Because, like you said, we all were born at a different time and date and all the things. Like, there's so many little factors that happened the moment you took your first breath. And that is, that's what makes us all individual, right? And I'll say this plenty of times, and maybe this can be our segue into our conversation uh, when we sign off of our recording. But I'll say this a lot, like, I'm a Scorpio, I'm a control freak. Like, Scorpios are that, they're really good salespeople, right? And knowing and learning more about myself and how I interact with myself as a Scorpio, um, it's just fun to use that as a conversation opener or something to lighten the conversation, right? Like, you can point at those cool, unique things about yourself that might resonate or connect with the other person. Like, you never know. I know in this sisterhood, Dawn, her and I are really close with our birthdays, and we're both Scorpios. And that's part of how we met. Like, I had done it's my birthday post in some group many years or a few years ago anyway. And that was just, hey, it's a piece of connection. We talk about that all the time. Um, so using, I don't know, maybe this is a question just for you, Stevie. Like, how do you use your zodiac and the moon phases and planning in your everyday life or slash building your businesses?
Yeah, so I always do like I go through, um, see what house it is, what it's in, and it's always funny because like I said, you start seeing those patterns when you realize them. So October, that new moon is always in my business house. That's when I started my first business. That's when I started my certification for I think both my group fitness instruction and my moonology stuff. Um, Actually, when I quit my job, when I knew that I was going to quit my next job. So seeing all those pieces, you start to see those patterns. You're like, okay, this starts to make sense because I was never aware of it until I was aware of it. Like, oh man, I have been missing a key component of like goal setting my entire life.
And when you can point out those similarities, it sparks that thing in someone else, like it just did for me. I'm like, ooh, I need to go back and look at my chart and look at the month of August. And because that's always been a tipping point in a lot of things, like you're saying, jobs and life and all sorts of things. So um that's a little homework assignment for myself and you being my moon coach. But um is there anything you want to add before we sign off of the recording and into our live discussion?
I will add that you are not just your sun sign. Like everyone knows that one, and that's the one that everyone knows, and why people are like, oh, all Geminis can't be the same. Like people born in like a 6 week period can't be the same. It's because you have other stuff going on. I'm probably the most Gemini you're ever gonna meet because Mercury, which is ruled by Gemini, is in Gemini for me. And I have a stellium there, which means that there are 3 big placements in that area. Oh, I got a lot of Gemini, but they're not all like me.
Well, and that actually made me just think my moon is in Leo, which is August.
You have a lot of fire.
Awesome. Well, let's sign off this and jump on to our live discussion. As things come up for you in the replay, reach out to Stevie or I. We'll make it happen for you. All right. Talk soon.